Hey, everyone! Welcome to today's show, where we'll be tackling a topic that might seem intimidating at first, the global economy. Think of the global economy as a giant interconnected game of Monopoly. There are players, countries, making moves, trading resources, and trying to come out on top. Some players are winning, some are struggling, and some are just trying to keep their heads above water. Today, we're going to dive into the game board, analyze the players, and try to understand the rules. We'll be looking at the latest data, current trends, and expert opinions to get a clearer picture of what's really going on in the world. So buckle up, grab your thinking caps, and let's get this economic party started. You know those confusing economic headlines you see everywhere? US debt ceiling drama? Or Japanese stocks go bananas? It's enough to make your head spin, right? Well, we're going to decode those headlines and figure out what they actually mean for you and me. Because let's be real, behind all the jargon and technical terms, economics is ultimately about people. It's about our jobs, our investments, and our ability to afford that extra latte or three. We'll be looking at the big players like the US and China, as well as emerging economies like India and Brazil. We'll also explore the ripple effects of global events like the ongoing conflict in Europe and how they impact the economic landscape. The global economy is like a constantly evolving puzzle, and our goal today is to put some of the pieces together. Let's start by rewinding the clock to 2022. Remember that year? Yeah, not the best time for the global economy. We were hit with a perfect storm of challenges. Supply chains went haywire, inflation soared to record highs, interest rates skyrocketed, and energy prices went through the roof. Fast forward to 2023, and thankfully, things started looking a bit brighter. Inflation began to cool down, energy prices stabilized, and those crazy interest rate hikes finally started to taper off. Some countries, like the US and India, even managed to pull off impressive economic performances despite the challenges. But as with any good story, there were some unexpected plot twists along the way. Picture this. You're craving a new phone, but guess what? No phones. Not because they're sold out, but because the tiny chips that go in them are stuck on a cargo ship halfway across the world. That, my friends, was the supply chain crisis in a nutshell. Factories shut down, demand shifted, and suddenly the whole system for making and moving stuff went haywire. Companies couldn't get the materials they needed, production slowed down, and prices started creeping up. Ordering something online became a game of roulette. Would it arrive in a week? A month? Next year? Who knew? The supply chain crisis was a stark reminder that our global economy is more interconnected than ever, for better or for worse. Remember those good old days when you could buy a gallon of gas without having a minor panic attack? Yeah, those were the days. In 2022, inflation decided to make a grand entrance, and it wasn't pretty. Prices for everything, gas, groceries, rent, went through the roof, and suddenly, our wallets were feeling a lot lighter. What caused this sudden price surge? Well, it was a combination of factors. The conflict in Ukraine sent energy prices soaring, which had a ripple effect on pretty much everything else. The problem with inflation is that it erodes our purchasing power. Central banks around the world knew they had to get inflation under control, but it was a delicate balancing act. They had to raise interest rates to cool down the economy, but doing so too aggressively could trigger a recession. It was a classic case of damned if you do, damned if you don't. So, how do you fight inflation? One word, interest rates. Central banks like the Federal Reserve, the Fed in the US, have this powerful tool that's kind of like a giant economic thermostat. They can raise or lower interest rates to heat up or cool down the economy. In 2022, the Fed was facing an inflation inferno, so they decided to crank up the interest rates, and I mean really crank them up. Higher interest rates make it more expensive to borrow money, which discourages spending and investment. But here's the catch. Raising interest rates too quickly can shock the economy into a recession. The Fed had to walk a tightrope, trying to find that sweet spot between taming inflation and avoiding a full-blown economic meltdown. As if supply chain woes and skyrocketing inflation weren't enough, 2022 decided to throw another curveball our way: an energy crisis. The conflict in Ukraine was a major factor in this energy turmoil. Russia is a major energy supplier, and the sanctions imposed on them sent shockwaves through global markets. Suddenly, countries that relied heavily on Russian oil and gas had to scramble for alternative sources, which drove up prices even further. The energy crisis also exposed the world's dependence on fossil fuels and the urgent need to transition to cleaner, more sustainable energy sources. High energy prices fueled inflation, businesses struggled with rising costs, and consumers felt the pinch at the pump and on their energy bills. Remember that feeling when you finally get over a nasty cold, you can breathe again, your energy is back, and the world seems a little brighter? That's kind of what 2023 felt like for the global economy as inflation finally started to chill out. It wasn't like prices suddenly dropped, that would be crazy talk, but at least they weren't skyrocketing like a rocket anymore. Higher borrowing costs meant people weren't as eager to splurge on that new car or fancy vacation, which helped to ease demand and in turn slow down those price increases. Inflation was still higher than we'd like, and some things, like those pesky grocery bills, seemed determined to stay stubbornly expensive. But hey, after the roller coaster ride of 2022, even a slight dip in inflation felt like a major victory. Remember those eye-watering gas prices that had us all considering selling our cars and investing in a good pair of walking shoes? Yeah, thankfully, those started to come down to earth in 2023. Don't get me wrong, filling up the tank wasn't exactly cheap, but it no longer felt like we were handing over our life savings at the pump. What happened? Well, remember that energy crisis we talked about, fueled by the conflict in Ukraine? Thankfully, things started to stabilize a bit on that front. Global oil production increased, and while geopolitical tensions were still simmering, they weren't sending energy markets into a complete frenzy. Plus, remember that push for renewable energy? It started to gain some serious momentum. This shift towards cleaner energy wasn't just good for the planet, it also helped to create a more stable and sustainable energy future. Remember that giant economic thermostat I mentioned earlier, the one controlled by the Fed? Well, after cranking up the heat to fight inflation in 2022, they finally started to ease off the gas, or maybe I should say the interest rates, in 2023. Now don't get too excited. We're not talking about a dramatic drop in interest rates. It was more like a gradual easing, a baby step towards a more balanced approach. The Fed was still laser focused on taming inflation, but they also didn't want to slam the brakes on the economy and send us careening into a recession. Lower interest rates meant it was a little easier to borrow money, which could stimulate investment and spending. It was all about finding that delicate balance, a high-wire act with the global economy hanging in the balance. While the global economy was busy trying to find its footing in 2023, two countries stood out from the crowd: the United States and India. These economic powerhouses defied the odds and managed to pull off some seriously impressive growth, becoming the comeback kids of the year. The US economy, known for its resilience and ability to bounce back from tough times, proved its mettle once again. Despite facing high inflation and rising interest rates, consumer spending remained strong, fueled by a robust job market and pent-up demand. Meanwhile, India, the rising star of the global economy, blazed its own trail. With a young and growing population, a burgeoning middle class, and ambitious government initiatives, India's economy was firing on all cylinders. All right, let's talk about Germany, the economic powerhouse of Europe, the land of high-quality cars and efficient manufacturing. They've always been the envy of the world when it comes to economic stability and growth. But lately, not so much. In fact, in 2023, Germany found itself in a bit of a slump, with its economy barely growing. So, what happened? Well, remember that energy crisis we talked about? Germany got hit particularly hard. They relied heavily on Russia for natural gas, and when those supplies got disrupted, it sent a shockwave through their entire industrial sector. Factories had to cut back production, energy prices soared, and suddenly, the German economic engine sputtered. Despite this economic hiccup, there's still a lot going for Germany. The German economy is like a well-oiled machine that just needs a little tune-up to get back in top gear. Let's hop over to Japan, the land of the rising sun and bullet trains. Japan's economy is a mix of technological prowess and a shrinking population. Lately, things have been dynamic. Inflation finally arrived in 2023. Japan struggled with deflation for years. Deflation means falling prices, which isn't always good. It can lead to economic stagnation. But inflation in 2023 wasn't the good kind, driven by soaring global energy prices. Japan's currency, the yen, weakened against the US dollar. This made Japanese goods cheaper for foreign buyers, but imports became more expensive, fueling inflation. The Bank of Japan has its work cut out for it. Amidst uncertainty, there's a glimmer of hope. Japan's stock market surged, fueled by a weak yen and shifting supply chains, and a certain investing guru named Warren Buffett. Japan's economy is proving to be surprisingly resilient. All right, let's shift gears and head over to India, the land of vibrant colors, spicy curries, and an economy that's been absolutely on fire. India has emerged as one of the fastest growing major economies in the world, and let me tell you, they're not slowing down anytime soon. So, what's fueling this incredible growth spurt? Well, for starters, India has a young and rapidly growing population, which means a larger workforce and a growing consumer base. And let's not forget about that burgeoning middle class. Millions of people are moving up the economic ladder, which means more disposable income and a surge in demand for goods and services. But it's not just demographics. The Indian government has been making some seriously smart moves to boost economic growth, investing heavily in infrastructure projects like roads, railways, and airports. This not only creates jobs in the short term, but also lays the foundation for long-term economic expansion. And let's not forget about India's thriving tech sector. From software development to e-commerce, Indian companies are becoming global players, attracting foreign investment and creating a new generation of tech-savvy entrepreneurs. Of course, India still faces challenges like poverty, inequality, and a complex bureaucracy, but the future looks incredibly bright for this economic powerhouse. With a young and dynamic population, a pro-growth government, and a spirit of innovation, India is poised to become a major player on the global economic stage. All right, let's talk about China, the economic behemoth, the factory of the world. China's economy is transitioning, shifting from export-driven growth to domestic consumption and services. Trade tensions with the US, an aging population, and a strained property market are challenges. But China has a growing middle class and is investing in innovation. It's a new chapter for China's economy. Let's head back home to the United States, the land of opportunity and innovation. The US economy remains the largest and most influential in the world. Its diversity makes it resilient. From tech giants in Silicon Valley to farmers in the Midwest and small business owners on Main Street, the US economy is a melting pot of industries and workers. It benefits from a strong culture of innovation and entrepreneurship, driving economic growth and creating new industries and jobs. The US economy will continue to be a force on the global stage. All right, folks, we've covered a lot of ground from supply chain chaos to inflation headaches and interest rate roller coasters. But now comes the big question. What's in store for the global economy in 2024 and beyond? Can we stick the landing after this wild economic ride, or are we in for another loop-de-loop? Economists are throwing around this term soft landing. Basically, it means getting inflation under control without sending the economy into a nosedive. Think of it like trying to gently land a plane on a windy day. You need a skilled pilot and a little bit of luck. Central banks around the world, those economic pilots we talked about, are trying to pull off this delicate maneuver. They're carefully easing off those interest rate hikes, hoping to avoid slamming on the brakes too hard. But it's a tricky balancing act. Too much easing could reignite inflation, while too little could stall economic growth. So, what's the verdict? Well, it's too early to say for sure. The global economy is like a constantly changing weather pattern, hard to predict with absolute certainty. But hey, at least we're not talking about dumpster fires and economic meltdowns anymore, right? That's gotta count for something. The tech revolution, shaping the future of work and growth. Technology will play a massive role in shaping the global economy, from AI and automation to blockchain and the metaverse. Technology creates new opportunities and boosts productivity. It leads to new industries we haven't even imagined yet. The key is to adapt and evolve, foster innovation and entrepreneurship. With the right approach, we can create a more prosperous and equitable future for everyone. Section 3, the balancing act, navigating global challenges and opportunities. All right, we've talked about the good, the bad, and the uncertain. Now let's get real for a second. The global economy is facing some serious challenges in the years ahead. We're talking about climate change, geopolitical tensions, rising inequality, and oh yeah, that pesky national debt that seems to keep growing like a weed. But hey, before you go full-on doomsday prepper, let's remember that with every challenge comes opportunity. Climate change, for example, is a dire threat, but it's also driving massive investment in renewable energy, clean technologies, and sustainable solutions. Geopolitical tensions are a concern, but they also highlight the importance of global cooperation, diplomacy, and finding common ground. The key is to approach these challenges with a balance of pragmatism and optimism. We need to be realistic about the risks, but also hopeful about our ability to find solutions. We need to work together, governments, businesses, and individuals, to create a more sustainable, equitable, and prosperous future for all. Remember that interconnected game of Monopoly we talked about earlier? Well, it's time to stop playing by the old rules, where a few players win big while others struggle to stay in the game. We need to rewrite the rules, create a more level playing field, and ensure that everyone has a chance to thrive. It's a tall order, but hey, if we can handle supply chain chaos and inflation headaches, I'm pretty sure we can handle anything. Section 1. Key takeaways. The global economy in a nutshell. All right, folks, we've journeyed through the wild world of the global economy, from supply chain snags to inflation headaches, interest rate roller coasters, and the ever-present uncertainty of the future. It's been a wild ride, right? But hey, at least you're still here, and hopefully, you've picked up some knowledge nuggets along the way. So, what are the key takeaways from our economic adventure? First, the global economy is like a giant interconnected game of Monopoly, with countries, businesses, and individuals all vying for a piece of the pie. Second, it's constantly changing, constantly evolving, like that friend who always has a new side hustle going on. Third, it's influenced by a complex web of factors: geopolitics, technology, demographics, you name it, making it nearly impossible to predict with absolute certainty. But here's the good news. Even though the global economy can seem intimidating, even though it throws curveballs like an all-star pitcher, it's not some unknowable, mystical force. With a little effort, a little humor, and maybe a few cups of coffee, we can all understand the basics and how they impact our lives. Hassan's Hot Takes, my 2 cents on economics and life. Now, I'm no economic genius. I don't have a crystal ball that tells me the future of the stock market. First, don't believe the hype. People making wild predictions, trying to sell you get-rich-quick schemes. Don't get caught up in the hysteria. Second, focus on what you can control. You can control your own financial decisions. Third, don't forget about the human element. It's about our jobs, our families, our hopes, and our dreams. Thanks for watching, and until next time, stay curious, stay informed, and stay awesome.